the merciless glare of a noonday sun, they branded her guilty. A poisoner. A witch. A widow. The gallows, hastily erected in the dusty square of Marrow Creek, loomed crooked and raw, mirroring the warped justice that gripped the town. Dust swirled in lazy spirals, sweat beaded beneath every collar. Yet no soul dared leave. Even the children, wide-eyed, clung to their mothers' skirts, waiting for the woman in brown to swing. She stood on the wooden platform, hands bound, her posture unyielding, but her frame frail, as if grief and hunger had carved her hollow. Her dress, once ivory, now bore the hue of parched earth. Her hair was pinned tightly, her cheeks sunken, her eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. She shed no tears. They had dried up the day the church door bore the damning notice. Lydia Harrow, guilty of murder by poison. No one questioned how her husband died. No one probed the bruises marring her arms each Sunday. Caleb Marrow was the mayor's son, untouchable even in death. They whispered she slipped poison into his whiskey, that he convulsed in his sleep, that her silence was her confession. Lydia had not spoken since the verdict, her muteness a final act of defiance. The preacher's voice cracked like brittle wood as he read from the Psalms, avoiding her gaze. The townsfolk, who once bought her bread, or sent their children to her for lessons, kept their eyes down, fixed on the dirt or the swaying rope above her head. The sheriff stepped forward, his tone not unkind. "Lydia Harrow," he said, "you've been sentenced to hang for the murder of your husband. May God have mercy on your soul." She blinked slowly. The deputy tightened the noose. The sheriff raised his hand. A gunshot shattered the stillness. The crowd screamed, ducked, horses reared, a woman collapsed. The rope above Lydia snapped, falling like a wilted vine. All eyes turned to the square's edge, where a man sat astride a black horse. His long coat, tattered and dust-stained, hung from his lean frame. A rifle rested in his hands, its barrel still warm. His face, half hidden by a wide-brimmed hat, revealed a sharp jaw, eyes like converted steel, and a mouth locked in eternal silence. Whispers ignited. "Is that him? It can't be. He's supposed to be dead." He rode forward, his gaze locked on the gallows. Dismounting without a word, he parted the crowd like a blade through water. The sheriff's hand twitched toward his gun, but froze when the man pointed at Lydia and spoke in a low, gravelly voice. "She belongs to me." The judge stammered. "This woman has been tried." The man stepped onto the platform, cutting him off. "She's under my protection. Anyone touches her dies." His words carried no theatrics, only finality. With a knife, he severed her bindings, meeting her eyes. She finished, not from fear, but disbelief. He offered no smell, no explanation. Turning to the crowd, he declared, "This trial's over." And somehow, they knew it was. Lydia barely recalled the ride, only the wind and the weight of unseen eyes. When she awoke, she was no longer beneath a gallows, but lying on furs in a dim cabin that smelled of smoke, pine, and rusted iron, left too long in rain. A fire crackled low, casting shadows across log walls. A lantern swayed from a beam, and beside it, the man sat, sharpening a knife. He hadn't spoken since their escape. She sat up, wrists raw, arms aching. He didn't look up, his blade gliding over the whetstone, steady as a pulse. Outside, the wind wailed through the pines like restless spirits. In the clearer light, she studied him, lean, sun-worn, a scar slicing from temple to jaw, like frozen lightning. His beard was dark, unsheathy, his eyes too tired to hate, too vigilant to trust. "Why?" she asked, her voice hoarse, unfamiliar. The question lingered like smoke. He paused, meeting her gaze for the first time. "They lied," he said as if it explained everything. "You don't know me," she whispered. "You don't know if I did it." I know, he replied. She waited for more. None came. He stood, poured hot water from a kettle, added crushed leaves from a tin, and handed her the mug. She took it, unsure whether to drink or weep. I don't need saving, she said after a long silence. He gave a dry chuckle. Didn't say you did. Lydia studied him again, and saw no hero, only a man haunted by his own demons. Saving her wasn't about justice, but something that gnawed at him when the fire burned low. What's your name? She asked. He stared at the flames. Don't use it much. Everyone has one once. Doesn't mean it's worth keeping. The words carried the weight of a grave. Why did you say I belong to you? She pressed, fingers tightening around the mug. He looked at her, not with possession, but with something fouler. Because it was the only thing that'd make them stop. She nodded, understanding more than she wished. The cabin was sparse but deliberate. A rifle above the door, a saddlebag in the corner, a stack of twine-bound letters, and near the window, a coat too small for him hanging on a peg. Is there someone else here? She asked quietly. He shook his head. Not anymore. That was all he offered. That and silence. She sipped the tea, bitter, but warm. Do they know where you brought me? She asked. They'll guess, he said, meeting her eyes. Might take a day. Might take two. Then we find out who you really are. The words chilled her more than the rope, but for the first time in weeks, she felt something beyond fear. She felt alive. Lydia hadn't always been the woman they whispered about. 3 winters ago, she lit candles in the chapel, smoothed children's hair before Sunday school, and baked bread for grieving neighbors. Her hands smelled of flower and lavender, not rope and blood. She came to Marrow Creek with her father after her mother's death, a quiet girl armed with scriptures and shy smiles. They ran a modest mill by the river, honest work that brought peace, however fleeting. But peace never lingered in towns ruled by men like the Marrows. Caleb had been charming at first, handsome in the arrogant way of those born to power, as if the world owed him deference. He'd arrive at the mill with wine or wildflowers plucked by some boy on the road. Lydia, naive and eager to please her father, agreed to court him. The wedding was swift, the bruises swifter. He never struck where the pastor might see, but her ribs knew his boots, her arms learned silence. When her father intervened, he fell from a horse 2 weeks later. The doctor called it an accident. Caleb called it settled. That winter, Lydia faded. The townsfolk noticed her smile wane, her steps slow. But none asked why. Asking meant acting. And Marrow Creek didn't lift a finger for women without lineage. Then one morning, Caleb didn't wake. He lay cold, stiff, foam on his lips, a shattered glass by his bed. She screamed loud enough to wake the town, and they turned on her. No one found poison, but they found motive, silence, a scapegoat in a broken woman who didn't weep enough at his funeral. They said she'd bided her time, that she'd always been too quiet, that no one else could have done it. The trial lasted 3 days, no lawyer, no mercy. The judge owed Caleb's father favors. The preacher offered prayers, nothing more. Her former students averted their eyes in the streets. The verdict fell like a hammer. Guilty. No one asked what it was like to bury a man she feared and be blamed for his death. To look in a mirror and not recognize the woman staring back. Now, in the cabin, Lydia stood before a wash basin, firelight dancing across her hollow cheeks. She touched the fading bruises beneath her collarbone, ghosts of uninvited fists. Behind her, the stranger moved with quiet purpose, mending gear, checking his rifle, feeding the fire. He asked no questions, offered no comfort, yet his presence kept her from shattering. I should have run before, she said softly. I stayed too long. He looked up. You stayed alive. That's what matters. She turned to him. Do you believe I did it? His eyes met hers. No. Why? Because you don't carry death the way killers do. You carry survival. She swallowed hard. He picked up firewood and headed for the door. I'll be back before dark. Don't open for anyone. Are they coming? They will. And he was gone, into the woods, into the cold. Lydia sank into a chair by the fire, its heat kissing her skin like a forgotten memory. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from remembering. Remembering who she was, before the bruises, the silence, the attempt to erase her. For the first time since the noose grazed her throat, she believed her story might not be over. The next morning, the air outside was sharp and gray, mist clinging to the treetops like breath on glass. Lydia stood by the door, watching shadows shift through the pine needles. The stranger hadn't returned, or perhaps he had, moving like a ghost. On the table, beside cold cornbread, lay a folded parchment. She unfolded it, scanning the faded ink. A coroner's report on Caleb's death, stamped by the sheriff. But it was wrong. It listed choking from alcohol, not poison. Her pulse quickened. At the bottom was a name, Dr. Elias Grover, who'd died 2 weeks before Caleb. She'd attended his wake. The report was forged. Her fingers shook as she refolded it. Why would the town fake this? Why would the sheriff sign it? How had he gotten it? The door creaked. She spun, but it was him. The outlaw she'd named Silas in her mind. He walked in, tossed a worn satchel to the floor, and went to the stove. Where did you get this? She demanded, holding up the document. He shrugged off his coat. Sheriff's office, drawer beneath the whiskey. You broke in? They broke the law first. He stirred the coals, the fire flaring. They knew I didn't do it, she whispered. He said nothing, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. Why would they lie? Because dead men can't shame powerful fathers, he said. Because it's easier to bury a woman than tarnish a name. The words struck like a slap. Why help me? She asked again. You don't owe me anything. Silas stepped forward, as if moving through fog only he could see. I once stood by and watched them hang someone I cared about, he said. Told myself it wasn't my fight, that silence would keep me alive. His jaw tightened. I buried her myself. Lydia's throat closed. He didn't elaborate. The guilt in his voice was enough. And now, she asked, now I don't stay silent. He pulled another document from his coat. A deed to Marrow family landlords, with Caleb's scrawled note cursing his father and threatening to seize everything. He was planning something, Silas said. Blackmail or worse. If Caleb meant to turn on his father. She murmured, maybe I wasn't the one they wanted gone. Keithas nodded. They needed a scapegoat. You were already broken, easy to blame, hard to defend. The fire popped. So what now? She asked. Now we prove it, Silas said, but not from here. She tensed. You want to go back to Marrow Creek? We have to. It's the only way to make them see. Or hang me twice, not while I'm breathing. His voice held no boast, only certainty. Feisty. Lydia exhaled. The fire's warmth felt fragile. She'd once thought death was the worst they could do, but living without a name, justice, or truth was worse. She reached for the papers, her hands steady. Then let's show them everything. The trail to Marrow Creek wound through pine ridges and greased creek beds, a path for trappers and outlaws. They rode in silence, Lydia behind Silas, gripping the saddle horn. Dusk's chill, seeping into her bones. The farther they went, the more she questioned her courage. By nightfall they camped near a river bend, far from the main road. Silas built a fire with practiced hands. Quiet, efficient. Lydia watched from across the flames, knees to her chest, the warmth doing little to ease her stomach's knot. She'd fled the gallows only to return to the lion's den. The silence stretched until she asked, Why do you live alone? He didn't look up from the pot he stirred. Because no one follows a ghost. That's what you are, she pressed. A ghost? His jaw worked. Something close. She waited. He set the pot aside. The smell of beans and ash filled the air. I wasn't always like this, he said. I had a name, a wife, a daughter. She was 5. I left for a job, a week guarding a payroll wagon. When I came back, the house was burned. They were still inside. Lydia's breath caught. Bandits, she asked. He shook his head. Deputies, looking for someone else, wrong address. No one was punished. She covered her mouth, his pain sharp and cutting. I tried to fight it, rode to the Capitol, begged the marshal. They said I must have done something to deserve it. Lydia stared into the flames, her throat tight. I'm sorry. Silas shrugged, as if apologies couldn't reach that far. I stopped trying, went south, learned to disappear. She thought of her own pain soaked in bruises, silence, and misnamed graves. How many people have you killed? She asked. He didn't flinch. Enough. Do you regret it? Some. Him? He met her gaze, not even a little. The fire popped. You scare me, she admitted. He looked away. Good. It might keep you alive. But his words held no threat, only a gentle warning. She studied his weathered face, calloused hands. She'd once thought strength was loud, demanding, breaking. But this man was quieter than the wind, heavier than iron. You remind me of a man I read about, she said, breaking the silence. He lived in a cave, cursed, they said. But when the town caught fire, he saved the children. Silas didn't respond. Maybe some men become ghosts, she added, so others can stay alive. He stood, adjusting the saddle blanket. Get some sleep. We ride early. But he added, almost inaudibly, you don't belong to anyone, Lydia. Not even me. The words settled into her ribs like warmth. Later, as the fire dimmed and Silas kept watch, Lydia lay awake, watching him under her blanket. She had no husband, no home, no name worth keeping, but tonight she felt protected, not owned, not safe, just a famille. They spotted smoke before the hooves. Mid-morning, as Silas saddled the horse and Lydia tied the bedroll, he froze, nostrils flaring like a wolf scenting blood. She followed his gaze. Gray smoke curled above the trees. That's not ours, he muttered. Then came the sound low, like thunder beneath the earth, growing louder, hooves several, fast. Her heart climbed her throat. Silas grabbed his rifle. Into the trees. Move. They ducked into the underbrush near the river, crouching behind rocks and pines, the camp just visible. Her breath came in bursts, palms slick. 5 riders emerged, black dusters, rifles slung, boots stomping toward the fire pit. Lydia recognized Sheriff Ellis. Another wore a silver star, not on his chest but tied around his neck like a trophy. They came fast, she whispered. Silas's eyes locked on the men. The one with the star lifted a flask. She was here. I'd bet a month's pay. The sheriff scanned the camp. He's with her. Has to be. Tracks are fresh, another grunted. Silas shifted, tension like a taut rope. He raised his rifle, finger brushing the trigger. Don't, she whispered. There's too many. I'm not aiming to shoot, he said. I'm watching who gives orders. The man with the star kicked ash into the wind. We take her back. The judge wants this done quiet. No rope this time. No rope, the sheriff asked. No witnesses either. Lydia's stomach churned. They're not arresting me, she said. They're planning to bury me. Ellis lowered the rifle, jaw clenched. They're cleaning a mess. The man with the star turned to his horse. Split up. 2 follow the tracks, the rest sweep the eastern ridge. We find her by nightfall. The riders mounted, 3 galloping east, 2 south toward the river. Silas pulled Lydia up. We move. They ran, the forest swallowing them. Roots snagged her boots, branches scraped her face, but she didn't slow. Silas carved a silent path, leading away from the trail. After an hour, they paused by a ravine. Lydia caught her breath. What do we do now? We don't run anymore, Silas said. We make them follow where we want them. Where's that? She asked. He pointed west to a hill's faint outline. Old silver mine, abandoned. No patrols. They won't expect us to turn back. You want to trap them? I want to give them a choice. What if they choose wrong? His face was grim. Then I bury them in the dark. She shivered, not from fear, but his cold certainty. They're not going to stop, she said. Even if we prove I didn't do it, men like that don't stop. I know, he said, Mont. That's why I will. He led her through the rocks toward the mine's narrow path. A gunshot echoed behind them. They froze. Silas didn't look back. They're getting closer. Lydia felt not dread, not panic, but resolve. She wasn't fleeing death anymore. She was walking toward truth. The silver mine was a scar in the earth. Its beams blackened. Entrance half collapsed. It hadn't heard a pickaxe in decades, but tonight it would bear witness. Silas lit a lantern, guiding Lydia inside. The air was heavy, thick with yeast and memory. Cobwebs draped like veils, the ground crunched underfoot. They camped behind a stone wall, hidden from the entrance. Silas rigged a trap line. Wire, broken glass, a rusted bell, along the corridor. Lydia unrolled her blanket, placing a cloth-wrapped bundle from her satchel on her lap, tied with a faded ribbon. She hadn't touched it since the trial. Now, hands trembling, she untied it. Caleb's leather-bound journal, found under the floorboards days before his death, beside a rusted pistol and coins. She'd thought it drunken ramblings, but in the mind's dark, she read with new eyes. The entries began innocently. Business, land disputes. Then came rage. My father's grip will end. I'll take everything, even if I spill blood. They'll believe what I tell them. The town's ours, always has been. Lydia watches me. I think she knows. I'll need to deal with that. Her breath caught. If she speaks to the sheriff, I'll say she seduced me. The church will turn on her. They always turn on the woman. Her hands shook. Another entry, erratic. The poison I keep for rats looks like sugar. Father takes it in his tea. Maybe it's time he did. She closed the journal, pressing it hard. He'd planned it all. Feud, his father's downfall. She was disposable, a pawn in his game of legacy. When it backfired, they burned her instead. Silas crouched beside her. What is it? She handed him the journal. He read silently, then set it down, his look grim, but understanding. This is enough, he said. For a trial? For a reckoning? He tucked it into his coat. There's one thing I don't understand, she said. Why hide this? Why not burn it? Guilt, Silas replied. He wasn't afraid of being caught. He was afraid of dying with no one to remember his intent. She nodded. He meant to be king, she whispered. All he left was a gallows. They sat, the mine groaning, wind humming like a buried voice. Silas spoke softly. When we go back, I want you to read it. They won't listen to me, she said. They'll have to. She shook her head. I'm no one to them. You were, he said. You still are. That's why they tried so hard to erase you. He checked the trap line. Lydia looked at her hands. She'd buried too much, her name, voice, hope. But in this mind, something stirred. She wouldn't speak to be heard. She'd speak to end Caleb's game with truth, even if the town bled for it. They rode into Marrow Creek at dawn. The town stirred slowly, light spilling through shutters. merchants raising awnings, children chasing roosters. No one noticed them at first. Silas's coat tight, hat low, Lydia's hood drawn. But nearing the square, silence spread like ripples. The gallows drew stairs, its rope repaired. A hammer nearby. Someone meant to finish the job. Lydia dismounted, boots touching the earth where the noose had grazed her. She wasn't trembling. She was burning. Silas stood beside her, rifle slung. The crowd grew. The baker, the blacksmith. Then Sheriff Ellis, eyes narrowing, hand near his holster. "You've got no right," he said. "I've got every right," Lydia cut in, voice sharp. "And I've got proof." She held up the journal. Gasps rippled. "That's Caleb's," someone muttered. Ellis scoffed. "Fabrication. Doesn't prove anything." Silas stepped forward, his shadow long in the morning light. "Let her speak." It wasn't a request. Ellis froze. Silas's rifle wasn't just for show. The town remembered what happened last time. Lydia climbed the gallows, legs recalling every creak, every knot. She stood tall, journal in hand, and read. Not the soft entries, but the rot. Curses, threats, the rat poison, how Caleb planned to ruin her if she spoke. Gasps became murmurs, faces darkened. The judge appeared, breathless, from the courthouse. "I'll need to see that," he said. "You'll do more than see it," Lydia replied. "You'll read it to the jury you never let me face." "We have no jury," he said. "You had no trial," she snapped. "Just a rope and a verdict built on silence." The preacher stepped forward, Bible clutched. "If this is true, we all bear the sin." Silas scanned the crowd. The mayor hadn't appeared, but a carriage approached, 2 guards flanking it. The elder Marrow. Lydia's grip tightened. Silas stepped closer. "Want me to stop him?" "No," she said. "I want him to hear." The old man stepped down, eyes cold. "You speak lies over my son's grave." "I speak his own words," she replied, opening the journal. Marrow lunged, hand raised, but Silas moved a hand to his chest, a shove, not violent but final. Marrow stumbled, caught by deputies. Kayla stood between them. "She stands," he said. "And you listen, or I bury your secrets in your churchyard." The judge took the journal. The square held its breath. Lydia stepped down, not as a criminal, but as the only one who'd spoken truth. The church bell rang at midday, not for prayer or mourning, but judgment. Word spread. The widow returned, bringing the dead with her. The courthouse filled. No trial called. Yet people crowded pews, leaned against windows, peered through cracks. The journal passed through 3 hands, each paler. Lydia stood at the pulpit, fingers gripping its edge. Silas leaned against the wall, silent, undeniable. Judge Callahan shuffled papers, trembling. "This account, if genuine, changes things." "It is genuine," Lydia said. "You knew what Caleb was. You didn't care until his father's money was on the line." No one argued. Sheriff Ellis spoke cautiously. "If it's true he poisoned his father's tea and died by his own hand, she ain't guilty of anything." Lydia faced the room, eyes sweeping faces that once turned away. "You were there," she said. "The day they tied the rope. You watched, and not one spoke up." Heads lowered, a woman sobbed. The pastor covered his face. She stepped down. "Do you know what it's like to be erased? To have your name twisted until even you believe it?" She paused. "I buried my voice to survive, but I'm done surviving." She walked the aisle, the crowd parting. "I didn't come for your mercy. I came to take back what you tried to steal." Outside, the gallows stood untouched. Ellis turned to the judge. "What do we do now?" Callahan looked at Lydia, then Silas, and nodded. "We clear her name publicly, and we investigate how this town allowed it." Lydia's knees nearly buckled. Not from fear, but relief laced with disbelief. Silas steadied her with a hand at her elbow. She looked up. He nodded, as if to say, "It's done." But it wasn't. The elder Marrow entered, leaning on a cane, fury in every wrinkle. "This is a circus. You'll undo my family's name over scribbles." "Your son wrote those scribbles," Lydia said. "He planned to kill you." "He was drunk," Marrow barked. "Doesn't make them true." Silas stepped forward. "I saw the autopsy. I saw the forged date the sheriff signed." The crowd tensed. Marrow's lips curled. "You think this town will believe you?" "They already have," Silas said. A voice rose from the back. "The blacksmith, then the baker, the pastor. I believe her. She was kind. She helped me when my wife died." Hands lifted, voices followed. The tide turned. Marrow trembled with rage. "You'll regret this." "No," Lydia said, "you will." She turned her back, her heel on the church floor. Silas's shadow beside hers. Not looming, not claiming, just there. Spring came early. The river thawed before the equinox. Wildflowers pushed through cemetery cracks, and the gallows were torn down plank by plank, by men who'd once watched. Lydia didn't ask. They just came. Tialant Sufalam. Working. No one said her name, but all knew why the noose would never hang again. She stayed in Marrow Creek longer than expected. A woman nearly buried by her town could have vanished like Silas, trailing stories like dust. But she stayed, reopening the schoolhouse, painting windows, replacing hymnals with blank pages for children's verses. At first, they kept their distance, called her Miss Lydia hesitantly, left food baskets on her porch, never knocking. She didn't mind. Time would heal what words couldn't. Each morning, she walked to town, head high, in the same brown dress, not from poverty but memory, so they'd never forget. Silas was gone before the frost melted. One morning, his bedroll was empty, his rifle missing, a lining etched by the fireplace. "Your life is your own now." He left no tracks. She didn't search. Some men aren't meant to stay, not because they can't love, but because they love in silence, distance, absence. Still, he wrote, not often, but enough. Letters arrived soggy, smudged, folded, brief. North is quiet, saw snow for the first time in 3 years, still breathing. Unsigned, but she knew. She never replied. She didn't need to. Once, during a thunderstorm, she found firewood on her porch tied with the rope that bound her wrists. She smiled. She kept that rope, not as fear's relic, but as a thread of memory, of who she was and who she refused to remain. One Sunday, the preacher asked if she'd share a word with the congregation. She declined, standing in the back pew, whispering 3 words into the hymn's hush. "I'm still here." The town heard, though they never said so. Years later, a child asked why the school had no name on its sign. "It's hers," he said. "Isn't that enough?" And it was. Lydia Harrow belonged to no one, not the gallows, the grave, nor the man who saved her. She belonged to herself, and the wind that once carried her name in shame now bore it in silence, pacey, strong, free.